new data is poking holes in what's become a prominent cultural myth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. This is Breakpoint. When it comes to divorce, writes Brad Wilcox and Lyman Stone in the Wall Street Journal recently, the research has generally backed the belief that it's best to wait until around 30 to tie the knot. Well, that's because the divorce rate is generally lower for those who wait before they wed. However, according to the National Survey of Family Growth, there's an interesting exception to this modern-day rule of thumb. Couples in their 20s who don't cohabitate first have some of the lowest divorce rates of any group. Now, it's not exactly clear, at least from the research, as to why this is the case. It is a cohort that is disproportionately religious, something that's linked to lower divorce rates across the board. Still, the data sheds further light on the relationship between cohabitation and marriage in American society. Decades of study now have led sociologists to broadly conclude that cohabitation leads to higher rates of divorce. In general, living with a partner, including one that eventually becomes a spouse, is associated with a 15% higher chance of splitting up after you're married. One Stanford study indicates that the rate is twice as high for those who cohabitate with someone other than their future spouse. We generally think that having more experience is better, says University of Denver psychologist Galena Rhodes. But what we find in relationships is just the opposite. More partners means more comparison, she argues. That can make long-term contentment harder. Cohabitation also teaches couples that one can always head for an exit when problems seem too daunting, instead of just pressing in and sticking it out. So as a result, while marriages in general are more stable at 30, marriage to one partner is better, even if it comes at a younger age. Still, despite a significant amount of data that says otherwise, society continues to push a very different story about cohabitation. People in their 20s, says convention, should avoid commitment. They should establish themselves professionally, and they should certainly try living together before going all the way and tying the knot. For a generation that's been raised in divorce homes, skepticism towards marriage is certainly understandable, as is the desire to try it before you buy it. This is, after all, that same generation that never had to pick a restaurant before checking a rating on Yelp. And so here we are in a culture where both delayed marriage and cohabitation are completely normal and common. But relational satisfaction, that's what's rare. Married couples report more satisfaction across the board than cohabiting couples in all kinds of areas, and report more trust by double digits. Even couples who've had to persevere in marriage through difficult seasons report higher levels of satisfaction. Marriage is also broadly connected with better health and better well-being, not to mention the well-being of children, 40% of whom today are born out of wedlock. Though all of this data about marriage overwhelmingly points to the same conclusion, fewer and fewer choose it. Compared to only 9% of Americans in 1970, more than a third of adults today, 35%, will never tie the knot. Now, that's not to say they won't have romantic relationships. That's not to say they won't create children. It just means they're going to opt out of marriage. But given all the relevant data, the idea that one should not get married too early, that just emphasizes the wrong factors. Wisdom should always be exercised with any commitment this big, but at the same time, age seems to matter far less than the commitment itself. Limitless sexual experience, self-actualization, the freedom to leave, these things don't actually produce relational happiness in the long term, despite what we hear. In fact, it seems they all damage the prospects of long-term happiness. See, in short, as a project of self-fulfillment, marriage might be worthless. However, as a way to reap the rewards of self-sacrifice, its value is incomparable. Of course, Christians know why. It's because marriage is part of the created order. Though some marriages will tragically end for various reasons, and others may want marriage but might struggle to find it, the church should still be about providing vital community for all of its members while still promoting marriage, because it is a God-given good. And when marriages hit rocky ground, there are resources like Focus on the Family's Hope Restored conferences. These are available for anyone willing to fight for their marriage, for the reconciliation, and they've got incredible stories of success to back it up. Ultimately, a successful marriage will require the same thing as Christianity requires of us, a commitment to something bigger than ourselves. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.